Hi, everyone. Welcome and welcome back to another episode on the Unpacking Creative Lives podcast. I'm your host, Banipreet, and in this episode, we talk to Lizzy Hoo. Among many things, she's a comedian, and I'm so excited to break down the process of comedy and of a comedian's life. So I got straight into it. I'm such a sucker for that. I'm such a nerd about this idea of knowing, what is a comedian's life? What is a life of an artist? The behind the scenes. And I talk about how, Lizzy hustled growing up when she was really, really young, and how that kind of led into and fed into her current life where she's still hustling. We talk about how she was, in the corporate world for 15 years before she took up comedy, and how she managed both careers, and then she finally let go of her corporate life and she became a full-time comedian. So we talk about all of that. I don't mention in the podcast of how we bumped into each other, and Lizzy does mention it in the interview. So I'll just give you a context. My friend and I went to the Factory Theatre in Sydney to watch her show Who Cares, and at the end of that show I waited for everyone to leave so I could maybe secretly meet her or ask someone if I could give her my card or something. And so I had my card ready, and there was a lady who was just packing up on stage. I think she was part of the crew. I said, could you please give this card to Lizzy? I would really love to interview her. And she said, yeah, sure, okay. And then my friend and I went to go have dinner. We kind of did like a loop around the Factory Theatre. There wasn't much open, and then we just saw this Thai takeout restaurant open. So we're like, okay, let's get that. That's perfect. That's healthy. And we go into the Thai takeout shop, and Lizzy's there. And I was like to my friend, I was like, oh my God, that's Lizzy. She's like, oh my God. And I was so excited to talk to her. And I was like, oh, I'd really love to have you on the podcast. And I'm such a fan, and da 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 da. And that's how we met. So it was so cool that I actually could meet her in person and just say how inspiring she was and how cool her show was. And I just loved it. So anyways, if you want to keep up with Lizzy and find out where she's at, her tag is at Lizzy Hoo, LIZZYHOO. All right, here's the episode. Lizzy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So first things first, I did a bit of homework, and I've learned that a year ago you started a podcast with a friend.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's called This Is the Thing. It's available on Spotify. And one of the first things I realized was your awareness of trees and tree trails. And I wonder, has that still carried? And is there any new information you can give us right now?
Yeah. So we started this podcast. You might notice that it hasn't been updated for a couple of months because me and my podcast partner, we just got like caught up in life, and she had a new job and she was working on the election. So that like took her out completely, and I was doing festivals. So, and we will bring it back one day. It will happen. But yeah, I remember that episode because we were still in lockdown. Like, it was a podcast born out of lockdown, like a lot of podcasts. And I don't know about you. Where were you in lockdown?
I was in Canberra. Yeah. And
okay.
I also I was starting podcasts and interviews as well.
Yeah, right. I was in Sydney. I'm in Melbourne now, but I was living in Sydney at the time. And I just started to notice things in my area that I'd never noticed before, even though I'd lived there 2-3 years in the same apartment. And I think because your world shrunk so much in lockdown, it was just 5 to 10 kilometers outside of your home. That's all we could do. And I just really started to notice all the beautiful trees in my area. And I wasn't the only person. I spoke to a lot of people about it on the podcast. So many people, friends, got back to me and said, yeah, I've noticed that too. I've got this favorite tree at the moment. And I think we were all finding a bit of joy or a bit of solace in nature. Like, we're just checking out what was around. And then I started looking up online, like, because I was running around Centennial Park a lot at the time in Sydney, which is a beautiful, beautiful park. And I thought, for sure someone's done some like history on these trees or some trails. And fair enough, like, there were proper tree trails marked out on the internet by, I think, like the caretakers or someone who's involved with the park. and was like, yeah, you can start at this tree and then you can go to this tree. This tree's been here for like however many 100 years, and this tree was really important. And it was just really, I was just really interested. And now it's something I do notice trees more, definitely. But yeah, I wonder if it was a lockdown thing that they had such an effect on me.
Yeah. I think a lot of people had that. You're right. Like just this kind of more attentiveness to things around you
Yeah.
because you're not just so like, just like,
Yeah.
I don't know, laser focus that you can actually look
Mm-hmm.
around. Um,
Yeah. I think that was big. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So I do have to tell you,
Mm.
I must confess, I did stalk you a little bit in
Oh,
terms of
that's
like
okay.
getting to your show. I remember, so I tried to find you. I find it really, I think you'll be able to enlighten me and tell me more about comedians in Australia. But most of the times, I'm watching Netflix specials from the States. And I really like that comedy. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I find someone on, Instagram and scrolling and it's an Australian comedian, I'm so, so excited.
Oh, cool.
Um, and I don't know what it is, but I don't know if I'm in control of it or not, but if it's someone South Asian or Asian, like I'm just drawn to them. It's
Mm-hmm.
just what it is. And
Yeah.
so I came across your Instagram and I was like, oh my God, the landing of these jokes are so good. Like it's so enjoyable and there's a story to it. And, Australian humor, I don't know. I think it's evolving now, but at some point it was very specific. And I think the whole storyline that you have and then the punchline, like the landing was so familiar to what I had, I often hear in the States and like just on Netflix specials and stuff. So anyways, I tried to get a show in Canberra because I'm currently in Canberra and it was sold out because I wanted to go with a group of friends. I was like, boo this. And so I was like to my friend, I was like, we need to go to Sydney and we need to go to one of her shows in Sydney.
Oh.
So then when we went to your show, we were late. So we were we were right at the end. It took us ages to find parking
Oh,
around the Factory
yeah.
Theatre.
It's
It
not the
is what it
best
is.
parking.
It is
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But we had come straight, like direct from Canberra and went straight into the city, found parking, and we were at the end of the line to come up, and it's general admission for anyone who doesn't know for the Factory Theatre. And my friend who I was with is short. And we were like, oh, we're at the back and are we going to be able to see? And then my friend played the short card with one of like the people who are managing the place. She's just like, is there a section for short people?
I
And
love that.
I was just like, this woman, she's killing it. And
Oh
and
my
then they
God.
said yes. They're like, oh, right at the front. They totally went along with it. So we got like front row
Were you in the
tickets.
front row? I
We were not like
probably.
directly in front. We were on the
Yeah. Okay.
side. And so there was
Okay.
like two seats on the side. I was like, yes, this is the
Yes.
dream.
Oh, that worked out so well. I'm so happy, and thank you so much. I'm so sorry my Canberra show was sold out, and I was surprised as anyone else. I was
Are
like,
you?
wow, what's happening? Yeah, I was like, I don't really gig that much in Canberra. And I was like, oh, wait, yeah, I guess, yeah. Canberra, thank you. Thank you. I think because like comedy, there's not as many people at the comedy festival, like Canberrans really like come out for it, which is so good. And thank you so much for driving to Sydney. I'm glad because my show was running late like every night then as well. So that probably worked out well for you. Um, but yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, just referencing what you said about American comics, I am inspired by American comics, I would say. And I've watched a lot of like those specials. You probably watched like the same ones, like I love Michelle Wolf and Ali Wong, Hassan Minaj, like yeah, I just love all their styles, and just that, yeah, so relatable to some of my experiences. And that's probably why, yeah, maybe you see some of yourself in my stories.
Well, I see the similarities in in the way in which you weave. So I'm sorry, I'm such a geek about this, but
Yeah.
like in the way in which you like weave in the storylines, and
Yeah.
some people have this build up or where they bring storylines from they mentioned in the first half of their act, back at the
Hmm.
end for this like climactic finale,
Yeah.
and you had that in your stories, and I was like, okay, I got like. it was a like there was a wholeness to it. There was an arc to it. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's so interesting to me. And so speaking about, you know, people you're inspired by, who's like the GOAT for you?
GOAT for me, I love Maria Bamford. Have you ever watched her stuff?
No,
Oh,
no.
she's the best. And a
Okay.
lot of comics will say that she's actually like, I would say, the GOAT. Like, she's so different and cool, and she's got the respect of like everyone. And she's like really true to her voice, and she just does stuff her way. And she's so funny. Like, she's so incredibly funny. I would say she's like, and if I'm in a bit of a funk with my comedy writing, or if I'm on the way to a gig and I don't want to do the gig, I often just put on her albums on Spotify, and they're so good just to listen to. I'm like, oh yeah, she's awesome. So that would be, I mean, Ali Wong's a huge influence for me, because she, like, when I first watched her, I was like, holy shit, I've never seen a comic that was like talking about the stuff I talk about just to my friends. And I had so many friends that reached out and were like, have you watched this? Have you watched this special? Like, it's you. Like, they're like, just in the way that they're like, so the stories that I would tell them, this, like, you know, things that she would, anyway. So that, like, yeah, obviously, like, she's a huge influence.
That
But
was so funny with your like you have two Ali Wong jokes that I love.
mm,
One was like the Padster RSL one. It's like, would Ali
oh
Wong
my,
be
oh my gosh, I did that on,
Padster RSL? That
and
was
it,
so good.
you know what,
Because
it
I live in
happens.
Revesby in Sydney.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
from Revesby. So
Oh yeah.
just the
See, you got
landing
it.
of that joke right
You
at the
got
end.
it.
It was so good. And then your Aldi Wong joke. It was so
Yeah.
funny because when I was telling people I went to go see a comedian,
Yeah.
you know, I'm like, her name's Lizzy Hoo and she's, you know, this and this and this and this. And they're like, oh, is it like Ali Wong? I was like, no,
No.
it's not.
Like, it's like, so this is a real thing that I think about quite a lot, because, like, I get that we look similar. Like, we've got glasses, we've got even like facial structure, like she's probably like a foot shorter than me, and very tiny, but yeah, I get that, but like the Padstow RSL joke, I'm like, can you not put two and two together? Can you not just see that we look alike? And like, why would she be here? Why would she? I did another gig just 2 weeks ago, and it was the Essendon football grand final debate. So I was on this like debate team, random gig. And this lady came up to me afterwards and said, oh, we love your stuff. We loved all the pregnancy stuff. And I'm like, at first I'm like, oh, thanks. You've just seen me do 5 to 7 minutes on stage
Right.
by myself in my Australian accent, talking about AFL. And I'm like, could you not comprehend that the chick you saw on Netflix is not me? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so weird. Like, that in people's minds, there can only be one Asian female comic.
Yeah. But
And
I think this
she
is
looks
like
exactly the same.
it's so true. But I mean, I think it's like it's a compliment that, that your friends would even call you and say like, that sounds like you. That's
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think that's a huge compliment. But then also it's like you're starting that conversation as well. Like, I feel like, eventually when there are other, Asian, biracial comedians, they won't have to answer those questions anymore because you already had those conversations.
Yeah, that's
do you know
true.
what I mean? But it's like what you have to deal with. But I'm so curious to know, like, I have so many questions. Okay, so tell me how, when it comes to crafting a joke, since we're on comedy and the actual craft of a joke, I watched an interview with Kevin Hart and he spoke about how he creates a joke in like his 2-hour special. And so within every 2 years, he'll put a special out. But the process of that is like he'll write some jokes up. He'll take it to, a couple of clubs, and then he would try them out. Then he would craft them a bit more, and then he would take them to theaters. And then after that, then he would take it to big arenas. And then what he said was, he said, if he takes it to a big arena and the laugh isn't right, he'll come back. And so like he'll come back to the theaters and he'll start reworking the joke, and then he'll go back, and then by the time, you know, his Netflix special is there, it's like everything's on point. Like, you know, when the laugh's going to come, you know, when the drop's going to come. And I wonder, how is that for you? Like, just from like a seed of an idea to like a landing joke on a special, you know, for example.
I mean, Kevin Hart's in kind of a world of his own, but it is like a similar process for me, but on a very much like smaller scale. So yes, at the moment, it's the end of the year, it's October-ish, not quite the end of the year, but getting there. And this is the time where comedians are like freaking out that they've got to put a show together. And we're all in rooms and small clubs testing jokes. Yeah. So even last night, I think I tested like 3 or 4 different jokes. And for me, I like, if the idea of the joke is working, that's a good sign for me in those small club rooms. Like, if the premise of the joke is working, or like the main nugget feel of the joke, I'm happy with that. And from then I can sort of workshop it, I'll just keep workshopping it basically. And even in the shows, it's funny like that you missed out on the Canberra show, because I think I told you when I ran into you at the Thai restaurant afterwards, I said that was my second proper time of doing that show that you saw in Sydney.
Yes.
So in between Canberra, I did Melbourne for like 23 shows. So in that time, like, the show got heaps better than what was in Canberra. Like, Canberra was still a fun show and a really fun audience, and I had a really great time, and the audience did as well. But by Sydney, heaps better. So I'm really glad that you caught that show. But it is just, I think for us in Australia, the festival season is our time where we like really fine tune the joke. And then going on to like a gala or something like that, which would, I guess, Kevin Hart's stadium equivalent, where we would do like a 4 or 5 minute set to a huge, you know, 1,000, 1,500 seater theater. That's when you would take something that you've done and you know it works like 90% of the time. Yeah. So it is a similar process, but it is just like so much chipping away. Like, I've got a joke that I did recently on TV that was in my 2021 show. And I thought that'll be good for a TV spot, because it's like, I'm physical in it. It's fun. It's like general. It's a good time. But even when I workshopped it again, like I hadn't really done it much since 2021, brought it back. And whilst like most of it stayed the same, like I definitely added heaps more to it. So they're always evolving. Yeah. It's really weird, like how in comedy jokes can never be quite perfect. Like, you might always discover something about them.
Yeah. I find it really interesting how much you need an audience. Like right now I'm writing songs and I'm in the studio writing songs. So the idea of songwriting, I mean, there are musicians who, you know, want to try a song out and they take it, you know, to a market or some like smaller venue and to just test it out. But it's more so for comedy. And with songwriting, it's like, no, you go through it and then you put it out there and then it's there for speculation and it's like a hit or miss. Whereas like you have to you need the audience's involvement and their reactions, that like instant primal, like just a reaction of laughing to really sculpt it. I find that so fascinating. But like, how long did it take you? You know, you talked about like these comedians that you follow and you admire and their voice. How long did it take you to find your voice?
My voice. I think I'm still trying to find that, like, to some extent. I've definitely found Like there's definitely like a way that I tell my jokes that I have found like is quite familiar to me. And I work with a director a lot as well. And he's like very good at being like, oh, that's a Lizzy Hoo bit, you know, oh yeah, this has got your trademark, you know, drop bit of dry, bit of sass, bit of yeah.
Yeah, like understanding your cadence and your tone and
Yeah.
how it drops. Like Ali, for
Yeah.
example, Ali Wong, she has a specific tone in which
Oh,
she delivers,
totally.
right? And it's
Yeah.
consistent through all three of her
Yeah.
shows, you know, like there's a consistency. It's like a melody,
Oh,
you know, like something that's
and
unique
it
to you.
and she's leaned into that so
Yeah.
much more from like the first one to the third one. Like the
Yeah.
way that she like even like walks, it's like so much stronger than that first special. And even though I've watched clips of her before her specials, and she hasn't quite like it's still her, but it's not like what her specials are. And yeah, that's really interesting to see. And I think that just happens with time and experience, and you find what people react to as well. And I guess you naturally um, lean into whatever people are reacting to.
Yeah. I think that's true. It's so funny you say, you know, it comes with time and experience. Because you mentioned in another interview that anyone who knows you started in your 30s, you know? And so you started when you were 32. I think with comedy and with writing, age, and you work in writing as well, you're a writer, age works, you know, aging works for that craft, right? In your interview, you said, you know, there's a lot of it's good to start early as a comedian, and I'm just like, I don't think I agree. I feel like you're just going to get better and better because the craft in itself is like, you know, it just it tastes better, it just sounds better over time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting one. There's two ways I think you can look at it. Like I know lots of comics start when they're, you know, straight out of school. That's all they want to be, amazing. And they get so good at jokes. Like for example, an Aaron Chan started in high school and he's amazing. And he's an exceptional joke writer, and very funny. Um, but then I think what I tell myself, the advantage of starting late is life experience. I've had a whole nother life before comedy. Um, so I think like being relatable, uh, and that sort of thing is like super important for comedy. And because I've started late, I can do that.
Can I ask you just about your director? When you say you work with a director, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's different for comics. A lot of comics work with directors, especially for shows and stuff like that. It's just like a second pair of ears and eyes to go over something, and you're like, what do you think of this idea? And they're like, I don't really get it. Or, oh yeah, I like that. Or that's really funny. So it's just like someone that you bounce ideas off and work together on a show. And it's different for everyone. A lot of people just might use a director for structure and to get like like a show formed, or for just jokes, or yeah, for more physical parts of a show or something like that. So yeah, it's basically someone that you bounce ideas off.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I guess if it's really a director and it's, you know, it's all visuals, you have like another set of
Mm.
eyes that you're thinking about as well. You know, someone who's
Yeah.
watching. Yeah.
Mm.
I wonder. I feel like comedy has been under scrutiny for the past like 5 years. I would say, like, as in,
Mm.
like, it's very controversial, cancer culture, and all that.
Oh yeah. Mm.
What? Where do you draw the line with humor?
For me personally, I mean, everyone's different and everyone's got their own reasons that they do comedy, right? And I don't like we all comics have different experiences they're going in with. Um, and for me personally, whenever if I say something, especially like when you're working stuff out, you might say something you didn't know was offensive, or you thought it would be okay or something like that. And I don't know, if you get a lot of pullback from an audience, like you learn to read an audience pretty well. You can feel that energy, like, like the air sucked out of the room sort of thing. It's not a great feeling, and I don't want to do that. Like, I don't really want to yeah, make people feel like that. I'm happy to say things that are a bit like make you think, or a bit like hard truths or something like that. So happy to say that. But I wouldn't want to go after like a minority group, or for the sake of a joke or something. Like that would just feel weird to me. You got to be really clever about, if you're going to broach certain topics, you got to be really clever about it.
Yeah. I wonder, when you said you don't want that air sucked out of the room feeling, I feel like only a comedian can really, or like a performer could really understand that. That's so interesting. Like, you don't want to create that feeling for someone. And I wonder, as an artist, so I I read in a book by Liz Gilbert. She talked about creativity and
Oh, I
being
love
an
that book.
artist.
That Big
You like
Magic.
Big Magic? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was just talking about it the other day. I read that when I was sort of starting out in comedy, I would
Really?
say. Yeah.
Well, she talks about the shitty sandwich that you have to eat in order
Yeah.
to do the stuff. So I wonder, what is the shitty sandwich that you have to eat as a comedian that people don't see?
Yeah, I think it's like by the time you get to festival and galas and all of that stuff, like the work's sort of been put in, to a joke. I think the shitty sandwiches, yeah, the gigs every night, the going and testing, throwing spaghetti at a wall sort of thing, seeing what sticks. I think that work, like the everyday sort of grinding it out, writing jokes that might never be jokes. Yeah, I guess it's that. Like, even I had a friend the other day that asked me to recommend her open mics in Sydney, and I was writing them down. I was like, oh yeah, that's what it was like that like trying to get stage time, going to a place, especially when I was 32 and had a job, like going to an open mic, putting my name in a hat with 40 other people,
Whoa.
waiting until 10:30 at night to like do 4 minutes of stage time. Like, it's that, I think that's some of the shit sandwich that you have to eat. Just this, yeah, terrible gigs, which are just part of it. Like, yeah, some gigs suck, but that's just part of doing comedy. Not all gigs are going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Okay, so by the time you get to festivals, you're just celebrating like how far you've come, really.
Yeah, you're in like show mode. You're in the workshop mode. You're like, okay, I've done all the writing and thinking and all that sort of stuff. You're still working stuff out. Like, you're always still working stuff out, but it's more, you're at a more sort of steady pace. Yeah.
So when you did your so the first gig that you did, and you mentioned that it was like a ballsy move that you invited your colleagues and friends and family because you were getting, you were trying to get to know people in Sydney, and you were like, what was I thinking? And I wonder, how have you evolved since then as a comedian from your first gig?
Well, I don't invite everyone to everything. So I think that's a pretty big, and I think it's pretty common. I don't know if it is that common, but I have spoken to other comics who are like, yeah, when I first started, I used to tell people about my gigs all the time. And now I would cringe at the thought of inviting someone to like an open mic where I'm testing out jokes. Like, that would be so bad for someone to come to that. But yeah, it was a weird thing. I think I did that though in retrospect because I thought like comedy would just be a one-off. Like, because I did this stand-up comedy course at Sydney Community College. It's 4 nights. There's a friends and family show at the end. That's the event that I invited my colleagues and cousins and friends to. Because I thought it would be just like a tick the box thing. Yep, I did stand-up comedy. It was fun. End of story. But yeah, I did it. I enjoyed it. And I had a few people say to me like that I should keep going. They're like, oh, you should keep going with that, And I probably took that on. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna I'm going to keep going with that. So
Just added fuel
yeah,
to the fire.
yeah, right. Yeah, fuel to the ego, I think. And I just kept going. So looking back, I went from that, and then I slowly sort of worked up to doing open mics. I did Raw Comedy, which is a national comedy competition. And then from then it just sort of snowballed. Like, I think comedy is one of those things that you just have to chip away at. Like, nobody cares if you take a break or if you quit. You just have to like keep going.
That's so interesting because now you're appearing on so much. Like when I was looking at all these things and doing, a bit of homework, I realized like you're everywhere. Like you were doing the cooking show, you were on the Cook Up with Adam Liao, and then Are You Paying Attention? That just happened a few days ago. And then you've performed at the Opera House, and then you've appeared on the project. So I wonder, at what point did you realize, oh, the tides are changing, like something's happening that's not in my control anymore?
Yeah, I think when I was probably before COVID. Well, no, maybe as COVID hit, I was going to do my second festival show. I felt good about it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this show. It's going to be great. But then obviously COVID changed so much. But I think after in 2021 though, we did get to do Melbourne Comedy Festival. It was like that first half of the year was okay. Like, I think COVID really hit us in June or July or something like that. So I did get to do Melbourne Comedy Festival, and I did the gala that year, and my show sold out like every night, and I couldn't believe it. I put on extra shows, and I was like, what is happening? This is awesome. Like, this is so beyond what I was thinking, because the year before, or the year in 2019, 2020 was cancelled. 2019, like, I put on my own show. I produced it myself. I was scrambling to get people there. Like, I'd have to be flyering out the front. I remember like a reviewer was coming in, and I had 5 ticket sales, and I called my brother who lives in Melbourne. I was like, can you get some friends together and come to my show again? Like, you'd already seen it like probably twice. And it's funny, like a real measure is my really good friends in Melbourne who came to that 2019 show like 3 or 4 times each, because they were so supportive. They're like, we're going to bring my work friends this time, or they were so amazing. And like this year they tell me like, oh, we only have to come once now, it's great. I'm like, yes. But like, that's a real measure for me. Like,
That's huge.
It's so nice.
So was there a point where like, when you did the gala and you're like, what is happening? Was there a time, like, do you know at what point it could have been, or it just kind of snowballed all together?
Yeah, I think the gala is a big thing for a comic. It sort of like there's not many opportunities to get like properly shot TV stuff. So yeah, I think the gala is a huge opportunity. Doing Melbourne for the first time is also like, even though, I did a half run, it was a good time. Like, I was very new, but it was still a good thing to do. And I think just that putting yourself out there. But I think more recent, like, so I quit my job at the end of last year, and I knew I had to, just with everything coming up. And
What
I
do you
knew
mean by that? What do you mean you knew you had to?
well, I just had too much on. So happy to have an office job during COVID and lockdown. Absolutely needed it, because as soon as we lock down, all your comedy work completely goes. You might do an occasional Zoom gig here or there, but it wouldn't have been enough to live on. So I was really happy that I had a job through lockdown. And then, toward the end of last year, it was just time. Like, I knew, I was like, this is it. I'm going to have to quit my job, which was really scary for me, because I have worked in an office environment for about 15 years. So that stability of like Monday to Friday, paycheck coming in this day every month was just so my norm, that I before I quit my job, like I made sure I saved like a little bit of money just in case, so I could pay myself in case I didn't get the work and that sort of thing. But yeah, it turns out that I didn't really need to worry about it, because I think work came back in a big way, like comedy work came back in a big way. And I just kept doing things that sort of put me out there a bit more.
Yeah, I wonder if that was a conscious decision because, I learned that you were very protective of money growing up. You're really obsessed with money
Oh,
and
yes.
very protective of
You
your
have done your
coins
research.
with your brother, and you got in trouble from your mom.
Yeah.
I am so curious to know, like that kind of obsession, that kind of
Mm,
obsession of abundance and wealth and
mm,
power,
mm,
like from
mm.
such a young age.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a primary school teacher, so I observe these things.
Yeah. Okay. That's so funny. Mm.
So what are some like, professional principles you live by? Because you're, even though you're a comedy woman, you're a businesswoman, you're running a business of like a brand. So what are some principles that you maintain?
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, because I also have a marketing and advertising degree. That's what
Yes.
I studied at uni,
Yes. I was going to
right?
say that's
So
so helpful for you.
yeah, super helpful. And my last job was in account management, so like client management. So a lot of like money stuff coming in, coming out, billing, invoicing, quoting, all that sort of stuff, and like helping people with their brands and
Oh,
essentially.
wow. So you've
Um,
just been preparing for a long time.
yeah, so it's a very useful crossover. Especially when I was still working, like I'd get my posters done in the studio, and it was very, very handy, very handy. But yeah, I think it's funny because in my family, my dad ran his own business. He had a small business. And so I was always around him, I don't know, talking about the business, him telling us ways he's going to make money and that sort of thing. I mean, he didn't, like, he ran a successful business enough to like put us through school and like feed us and all that sort of stuff. We're not like a rich family or anything. But I think I grew with that nature more. That my mum's a school teacher. She was a primary school teacher, and my brothers are teachers. So I think I gravitated towards what dad did, and they gravitated towards what mum did. And I was always like trying to make money as a kid. It was so weird. And I think mum encouraged it too, because she was like, yeah, great. If you want to make your own pocket money, that's awesome. And so I used to like charge my brother interest when he borrowed coins off me and stuff. And I'm like, what kind of weirdo 6-year-old like
And you used to
knows
iron
about interest,
shirts for
eh?
money as well, like people's
Yeah.
shirts.
Yeah, my neighbor Steve, he used to give me so much pocket money. Like I'd iron his shirts. And looking back, it's probably a bit weird. He'd be like, "Hey Liz, do you want to iron my work shirts?" And I'm like, "Yes." How much? Be like 50 cents each, which was like in the 90s, big money. Because if you did like 5 work shirts, it's $2. Yep, got that, $2.50. I washed and vacuumed his cars. It was so funny. Like he used to give me $10 for a wash and vacuum. That's big money. That's
Yeah.
pretty big when you're like 12
High
years
rolling.
old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
And mum found out how much he gave me and made me give back half. Like,
Oh, boo.
which like that's her mentality. She's like, you can't take 10. But my
And you're
dad, the
like, watch me,
businessman,
watch me take
yeah,
double.
my dad, the businessman, was like, what? Give it, like, she's got to give it 10. Anyway, Steve and I had a deal that he would pay me in 2 $5 notes, and I would only show mum my
Oh,
$5.
stop. All the
Yeah.
juice.
Yeah. So Steve had my back. But yeah, we did so much stuff. I think there was even at one point I found out about like a fruit wholesaler market you could go to. And I was like, this is so crazy. Mum, can we go to the fruit wholesaler market? I'm going to buy fruit and then I'll sell it from the front of the house to the neighbors.
That's amazing, though, that you thought that far ahead.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, let's do that. And Mum was like, I guess so. I think the teacher in her is like,
She
yeah,
was
this
like
teaches,
fostering the
yeah,
growth
this,
and the independent thought and everything.
yeah, this will teach you about money and kilograms and weight and like quantities and all that sort of stuff. And
That's
so,
like a gold mine
yeah,
for a primary school teacher, for a kid to be thinking
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
And then, yeah, we did that for a bit, but we ended up with just with so much fruit and vegetables. We had to, like,
So that kind of
yeah,
hustle, like bringing it to now, I guess it kind of makes sense because you got so much going on, like maintaining TV appearances, trying to build a show constantly, or recording a show, which you did in Melbourne, or social media and advertising. And I just wonder, how do you manage all of it? Like, what's the key?
yeah, it's a lot. And I think having worked in offices and having to manage my own workload for such a long time, has really helped me. Like I can really, like I used to work in magazine. Well, I've done a lot of like production work, so magazine production. Um, in even my account manager role, there was a lot of project management and stuff like that. So I'm okay. Like it seems like second nature to be like, oh, okay, I've got a show then. Oh, yep, I should really start working on it now. Let's think, like I can sort of work back
Oh, is that
quite
what you
well.
do? So you set the
Yeah,
target and then you work, okay, what do I have to do to
yeah,
get there?
yeah. And I'm good at keeping a calendar. Like I'm on top of my emails. Like I don't just like not answer things. And yeah, I kind of miss that part of my old job. The like, getting up at 8 o'clock, having somewhere to go, being around people. I do miss that. So for me now, even like I have to get up, I get up early still. I take the dog for a walk and then I like look at my computer. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing today? So I have to have that structure. I think just because I've had it for so long. But yeah, it is quite a lot to uh, keep on top of, and I'm finding myself like pretty busy. But then I also remind myself that, oh, you're running your own schedule now. Like you can do as much or as little as you want. Like it's up to you.
Do you set
And
boundaries for yourself?
um, yeah, there's times where I have a habit of I'm committed to overcommitting. That's
Yep.
what I say. Yeah. And I have a habit of like booking in so much stuff. Um, but then I have to cancel some of it, which I'm okay with now. Because before that, I hate cancel. I still hate canceling on people. But I figure if I give them enough notice and like it's not the stakes aren't too high, I'm like it's fine. Like don't do the gig tonight. Stay at home with your partner and watch TV. Like if that's what you need right now. Yeah. And I think lockdown sort of taught us um like that sort of self-care, like being conscious of ourselves and how we're feeling and that sort of thing. So yeah, I definitely try and take some time. And I also think back to when I was working full time and doing comedy, like if I clocked up the hours that I was dedicated to other work or comedy, be way more than what I'm doing now. So I kind of think for like on an hourly basis, I'm probably not doing as much like straight up work.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, to manage everything, what's like a typical day for you? Like
Um,
from waking
yeah.
up to walking your dog to like tapping out at night. Like what would be like a busy, like a good, solid, busy, successful day to you?
Yeah, it's so different every day. Um, but for me, like for example, today I've cooked a curry because my family's coming over for dinner tonight.
Okay.
And I'm
Nice.
like, okay, I have to cook a curry this morning. That's the only time I'm going to get to do it. So I've cooked a curry. I'm doing this. Then I like had a chat to you. I've walked the dog. And then after this, I'm going to go into the city because I need to buy a few outfits for this job that I've got coming up, which is so, and I'm like, sometimes I look and I'm like, okay, buying outfits is part of your job, I guess. But it is like, this is I hate shopping. So this for me is like such a drag. I'm like, I can't believe I've got to go out to the shops and like try on
Do you
shit.
online shop?
Yeah, see, I'm also last minute. Like by the time I thought about online shopping, like the delivery date was gonna really cut it fine. And then I'm like, I don't want to be stressed if it's not here and I have to like fly. I've got to fly somewhere on Thursday. So if it didn't get here to like Thursday morning or something like that, I would have probably had to have done like a last minute shop somewhere. Um, so yeah, that's and then my family's coming over for dinner tonight. So that's one day. But yeah, it's always a bit different. Like yesterday, I did, yeah, had a meeting, I had two meetings, um, exercised, went shopping, and then did a gig last night, did some writing, did a gig last night. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah. It's nice. It's nice
Yeah.
to be able to do this as a job. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's so interesting. Because I just wonder, like if if there was like a comedian starting out, or let me say broader, like an artist starting out wanting to build a business, a business brand, what advice would you give to them?
Um, I think in terms of craft, and working on your craft, it would something that you just have to do. Like I think sometimes when you start out, and I did this, is there was a lot of like me talking about it, me like writing in my room, but not actually going out and gigging. So that was like, and that was like my biggest hurdle. That was like just something I had to get over. Yeah, it's kind of like when you want to start running or something. It's like, yeah, I'm going to start running. You buy the shoes, you do one run, and then you
You
don't.
talk about it and be
Yeah,
like, oh,
you
I
talk
just
about.
went for a run.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what's
But
really funny?
mm,
You know that concept of if you announce your goals to everyone, you're more likely to succeed.
oh yes.
So there was a TED talk on this years ago, and they were debunking that theory
Mm,
because they were saying that talking about your goals or talking about your accomplishments is releases the same chemicals as actually doing it. And I
yeah,
was
I've
like,
heard that
that's effed
too.
up. That's
Yeah,
so crazy.
I've heard that too. I had someone, I can't even remember who it was, but it affected me. And they said, oh, I don't want to say what I want to do because my body will feel like I'm doing it already. Like I need to actually, and I have thought about that a lot because, yeah, it's not until you do it that you can, yeah, really like be like, yeah, I did that. You know, you've got to actually achieve something.
Lizzy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for the chat. It was really great.
How good was that? Thank you so much, Lizzy, for coming on the show. I had the best time. If you want to keep up with Lizzy and know where she's at, again, her tag is at Lizzy Hoo. You can also go to www.lizzyhoo.com to, find out where she is. And she will be at the comedy shows next year. So please, please, please keep an eye out for them. Her show is so good. If you want to keep up with me, I will have new music out coming in the new year. I might have another guest coming on at the end of the year or early next year. I don't know. I think now, before I was doing it quite regularly and I was really diligent and very proud of how much I accomplished in that first season. And now, just with music happening, I think I'm just going to try and focus on the quality of the conversation. So if I find someone interesting, if you find someone interesting, let me know. I would love to interview them and I'll keep an eye out for you. All right, everyone. Until next time. Bye.